NPL 3. And then, of course, Super Sunday with the finals race in the top tier and also the battle for that all-important week off and get the chance to go straight to the semi-final. So today on the agenda, obviously, we will talk all about the final day in all three tiers and just how everything has shaped up.
Particularly in the bottom two tiers.
Yeah.
What a final day it was.
Yeah, just
what
bonkers.
A final day. That Saturday must have been one of the best footballing Saturdays in, recent memories, kind of a cop-out because there haven't been a lot of those kind of Saturdays. But as far back as I've been following the state leagues, that is as good as I can remember.
And absolutely. And I mean, there's a lot to get through, of course, with the promotion battle that obviously ensued between the two. Well, they both were the Moreland sides, but one now being Moreland, one being Brunswick Juventus. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And of course, the relegation. Who was going to avoid that Pro-Rail playoff? Who was going to join the Pro-Rail playoff in NPL 3 as well? And of course, who was going to go down from NPL 3 into State 1 then? Who was going to come up? But today, Lachie, we're also going to be joined by Oakleigh Cannons' captain, Tyson Holmes. We start to look ahead to the finals this weekend and, of course, the Pro-Rail playoffs. The Pro-Rail playoffs obviously being Saturday and Sunday between GV Suns and Western United and Kingston versus Melbourne Victory. Both those games happening at Valley Park Events Centre, the old ABD Stadium up in Broadmeadows. And then, of course, our two NPL 1 finals this weekend, Lachie, simultaneous kickoffs. So they've kept the same kind of vibe. We get the big green between Green Gully and Bentley Greens, and then down Jack Edwards Reserve, Oakleigh versus Heidelberg. And Tyson Holmes will join us in a matter of minutes because he's had a big week and he's going to have a big game only days
Honestly,
after that.
I'm going to be very surprised if Tyson Holmes just joins us on one little Zoom frame because I'm just surprised he's not in pieces at the moment. He doesn't have to join the Zoom call with different bits of him like Exodia or something like the right leg of Tyson Holmes and the left leg of Tyson Holmes. He was, it's funny. Everyone at the conclusion of their Australia Cup upset over Brisbane City was, clearly a bit ginger as they were walking and had a bit of a waddle. You would have seen it when you were there. Yeah. Most people would call that limping, but I think the Oakleigh squad just call it walking these days. They're just so used to
tired and
carrying some kind of soreness that they are soldiering on. Yeah, soldiering into the finals as well.
Yeah, with all the injuries that are piling up, but still a lot of exciting games for Oakleigh. I mean, between the game against Heidelberg this weekend in the elimination final, then Sydney FC a few days later at Jack Edwards Reserve. If you can't get to one, try get to the other. It's going to be a bonkers few days down there at Jack Edwards. And the pitch looked great the other night. It looks like it's going to hold up again for really a big fortnight because obviously you mentioned Brisbane City, then Hume City coming to town, then Heidelberg, and then Sydney FC. I mean, Jack Edwards Reserve is going to be the ground staff are going to be very busy keeping it up to some good nick by the time we get to the nitty gritty and obviously finals just around the corner. So we'll chat to Tyson in a couple of minutes just about how things are shaping up. Obviously, in terms of all that's going on with the Australia Cup and of course the NPL finals too. So, Lachie, before we get to that, let's just for those who have been living under a rock over the last few days, just to sort of lay the foundation of how everything has ended in all three tiers, and this is how it has all ended. So the finals, all locked in, top 6 locked in, South Melbourne, Port Melbourne, top 2 sides, they get the week off this week. Oakleigh, Green Gully, Bentley, Heidelberg, Avondale misses out. Dandy City and Eastern Lions relegated to NPL 2.
Can you believe that though?
Absolutely. It's unbelievable.
Missing out on the final.
It's unbelievable. Coming up from NPL 2 is Moreland City and North Geelong Warriors. And going down, well, not confirmed just yet, but the two sides in the Pro-Rail playoffs, Kingston and Goulburn Valley Suns, they play both Melbourne Victory and Western United's Academy sides this weekend, as mentioned. But coming up from NPL 3 is Preston and Melbourne City. And going down, Springvale White Eagles, who were knocked out of that third last position by Ballarat City in that last game, joining Whittlesea in State League 1 next year, and a whole host of teams coming up, including Caroline the Caroline Springs, George Cross, Essendon Royals, Beau Morris and Boroondara, even though there is one team that isn't too happy
We shall see.
And we'll talk about that just a little bit later. But without further ado, let's get into it, Lachie. Let's start to look ahead towards the finals this weekend. We mentioned Oakleigh's massive fortnight, and it's a third of 4 big games to come. They finally get a good week's rest now.
Yeah, and as I said to you before, Nick, I'm just glad the person who's about to join us is joining us all in one piece. It's a relief.
No, absolutely, because they've just been playing so many games over the last month. But it's been one hell of a ride for Oakleigh, and we're joined now by their captain, Tyson Holmes. Tyson, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, Tyson, take us through the last couple of weeks. Into the quarterfinals of the Australia Cup, now into finals. It's been game after game, short turnarounds. It must feel strange to have a full week now to prepare.
Yeah, it does. We were actually saying the other day, it feels like we haven't actually trained in a very long time now. It's pretty much been game, recover for quite a while now. It's great for the club and great for the team. We want to be involved in as many competitions as possible. But it's also, it has sort of taken its toll as well on the squad a little bit because we've had a few injuries and things like that. And also boys being cup tied doesn't help. So we've really had to try and dig in with what players we have at the moment.
Well, particularly, the injuries are one thing, cup ties are another thing, but when you have to merge them all together like you guys did in the Australia Cup, you guys really were the wounded warriors, and it doesn't help when you end up going to extra time as well and playing an extra 30 minutes of football on top of what you guys did. Take us through your experience of that game out there on the park, because that was just an absolutely crazy fixture against Brisbane City. I remember speaking to Chris Taylor beforehand, and he was like, if we can just scrape through, that would be a good result. I'm not sure he quite expected to scrape through like that.
Yeah, look, it was just one of those crazy cup games. We knew Brisbane City were going to be really up for it. They'd be excited, have their tails up to come to Melbourne and play against a team like ours. But how we had to set up, we had our leading goal scorer, Wade Decker, at left back. We had Big Nick up top, who I think I heard the commentator say had played a total of 68 minutes all year. So, look, we started really well. Obviously, credit to Brisbane City. They kind of always kept within arm's length, though, and managed to get that late equaliser to send it in extra time. But we just had to reset at that point and just refocus and sort of believe in what we do. And I think we got our just rewards in extra time. But like you said, look, it wasn't ideal having to play that extra half an hour. We definitely didn't need it.
Just on Nick, Tyson, 68 minutes all season heading into last week. It's easy when you're not playing and you can kind of get your head down and in those moments where you're just not seeing much of the pitch, and then to take your opportunity like he did, I guess, how encouraging is it that someone like Nick can just flick a switch in a game like that, come up big? It looked like he could have easily scored. He had a penalty save, but even beyond that, he could have easily scored 4 or 5 goals. Just a comment on him and his character and just how he's been able to stay ready and be prepared for a moment like that.
Yeah, look, Nick has honestly been phenomenal all year. I know for a fact he would be disappointed in, I guess, his lack of minutes. That was his first start for the team. But around the club, around the change rooms, he rocks up every training session. He has a smile on his face. He brings a lot of hype and joy to the team and the squad, and he's just there basically for the boys. He's been waiting for that moment for quite some time now, and it was just really good that a lot of his hard work, he stays back after training, works on finishing and things like that all the time. So I think that kind of came to fruition. That was kind of his moment. He's been waiting for that, and it was really good to see him get a couple of goals and all the boys get around him a bit and sort of give back to, because he's had to sit there in the wings and pretty much watch us most of the year. So he's just been awesome for the character of the group. And it was good to see him get off the mark and get some reward for his efforts.
Yeah, it was, as you said, just reward, because the important thing to remember in that game as well is obviously, yes, you know, it's an NPL opponent against another NPL opponent, which is nothing new for you guys, but he was coming up against someone in Daniel Bowles who is not that long ago an A-League defender. He's not, an old A-League defender. He's 30 now. And honestly, Nick, a lot of times throughout that game, I thought made him look second rate with the amount of work he was putting in to lead the line.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing with Nick is his hold-up play is awesome. He's so strong. At training, you cannot get the ball off him. One thing, obviously, he probably lacked it late in the game was match fitness, but that's quite understandable. But during the game, he was attracting 2-3 defenders, holding the ball off and then laying it off for the likes of, Joe Guest and Chris Lucas and the other attackers. So what he was doing is actually drawing a lot of attention because of his size and his strength, and then it was actually bringing other players into play. And I think you saw that even in Guesty's performance. It allowed him to be a lot more free, get on the ball, score some goals, create goals. So it was just an all-round great performance, I think, from a lot of the players.
Well, I'm glad you brought him up because that's exactly where I was going to head to next. Nick got the first two, and then Joe was involved in either scoring or creating all of the rest in that game. I mean, how much do you enjoy working in that sort of midfield trio that usually is yourself, Oliver, and Joe? Knowing Joe's that sort of creative presence that you've got further ahead. That sounds like it's a really fun midfield to play in, and not only that, it's a midfield that when it's ticking along, it's probably the best in the competition.
Yeah, look, I love playing in there with those two. I came to the club, I think, back in 2020 would have been my first year, and Joe had come off winning the gold medal, and I'd won it the year before. So I was just really looking forward to actually playing with him. And then from that, those come out of really kind of nowhere is Ollie. Ollie's a bit of an unsung hero of that midfield. He's young. He covers a lot of ground. He makes a lot of interceptions, a lot of break-up play tackles, and allows me to get on the ball. And then obviously my job is to feed it forward and get the likes of Joe Guest, Joe Knowles, Lucas, Decker, and those sorts of players on the ball. But yeah, look, I guess he's one of those impact players that you can kind of blink in a game and he can put the game to bed. He's extremely explosive and he does a lot of damage in the front third, in particular with like his second man run. So I guess having me and Ollie behind him as well gives him the freedom to really take off and kind of gamble a bit as well. Because and then it's mine and Ollie's job to sort of sit there and control things and kind of protect him in a way.
Tyson, looking ahead to this weekend, I mean, Heidelberg is on the horizon. It's a team that you probably haven't had as much luck with against, at least in the league sense this year. What are you expecting from them? Because they've had a bit of an up and down season as well. They've kind of scraped in on the final day. But obviously coming to your home deck, as we spoke about, you get a full week to prepare for this game. What sort of game are you expecting from them when they come to town this weekend?
Yeah, look, I've come up against Heidelberg quite a lot in finals over the years, and I know what obviously Kasakis is all about. They'll be up for it. They'll be extremely physical, extremely vocal, really in your face kind of team. And as you said, they're the only team this year so far, I believe, that have done the double over us, I think. So, yeah, look, they'll have their tails up about that. And, they've got a lot of good players as well. Katzer, he especially comes finals times, Heidelberg are always thereabouts. So, they're going to bring a lot of physicality to the game and a lot of aggression and attack. And, we just got to be ready for that and play to our strengths.
And we've sort of seen since Heidelberg had their Australia Cup commitments of their own, obviously not progressing as far as you guys have, but it has seemed like in the past couple of weeks that fixture against an A-League opposition really did take quite a lot out of them physically. Obviously they got the win against the Eastern Lions, but previous to that they'd been struggling a little bit. Does it make it your challenge this weekend, your task, a little bit easier knowing that you're coming up against a squad that to an extent have also had those sort of same physical challenges and physical battles to contend with towards the pointy end of the season, as opposed to another team who maybe haven't been quite as deep in the cup as you guys have?
Yeah, well, I think in all honesty, out of the top six, I think the only two that haven't had a cup run is the top two teams, Port and South. And I think you can probably see that as well in their squads at the moment. They've got full squads to pick from. Everyone seems fit and healthy and they're firing and that's great for them. But the other clubs, obviously, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, we've had cup runs and dealing with those extra games, which they do take their toll, definitely. But, I think some teams now the Gully's out, Heidelberg's out, Bentley's out. I think some of those teams in the last week or two, I think you've seen their performances probably improve as well without that midweek fixture. So, look, it definitely plays a part. Obviously, the good thing is for us is we don't have that this week, which is, I think, the first time in a while. We're not going to be doubling up, which is nice. But then obviously then we've got to back it up on the Wednesday and play Sydney FC, which, isn't going to be an easy game either.
Well, how are you feeling about that fixture in the context of everything else that is going on? Because we've seen, particularly Heidelberg is one example, but Avondale, obviously the more recent, taking Brisbane to penalties. Bentley, obviously, and Sydney had a very close encounter in the previous round. How are you feeling about the prospect of taking on Sydney? Because obviously, I can only imagine as a player managing all these different commitments, you must be caught, because on the one hand, you guys want to go all the way in the finals, want to give yourself the best chance, but on the other, to host an A-League team, to give yourself the chance of knocking off someone like a Sydney FC and progressing to, I believe, the semis for the first time in Oakleigh's history would also be a massive achievement. So how are you feeling about that?
Well, look, I think a big part in it depends on what happens Friday night against Heidelberg. Obviously, if we beat Heidelberg, well, then we've got to actually think about and focus a bit on the following week, which would be obviously Port Melbourne away. So that comes into part. Obviously, if we don't get the result against Heidelberg, well, then you basically throw everything you've got into Sydney FC anyway on the Wednesday. As I said before, the issue for us in those cup games is we've got guys like Barcia and Lachie who we brought in mid-season. They're cup tied. So our squad depth on the Wednesday becomes very thin. I think against Brisbane City, the 11 players we had out there were the only senior players we've got in our squad. The rest was all under 20s, and a lot of those boys that have never even debuted for the senior team before. So, I think I did watch them against Bentley. I thought Bentley were very good against them. From more reports as well, they, probably felt a bit unlucky and probably rightly so. But, they took them all the way. And I think you saw that as well, Avondale against Brisbane Roar. I didn't get to watch that game, but I saw Charlie Austin's interview and he said that Avondale were probably the better team and those sort of things. So, there's a lot of opportunity there for players, especially our young playing group. The issue is they're signing players at the moment. I know they've signed Jack Rodwell, I think another visa from Nottingham Forest. Whereas, we're towing players along at the moment. So, it'll be a great night for the club either way, what happens. But, we'll just give it our best shot and see how we go.
Just in terms of personnel, Tyson, I saw Oscar was warming up on Wednesday at least to going through his run-throughs. Is there any hope that maybe you could get someone like Oscar Dillon back? Because at least that does help, at least from a defensive sense, but just getting some players on the park and, maybe Wade doesn't have to fill in at left back as often and maybe he can get further up the pitch. Are you hoping to get Oscar and maybe some more players back?
Yeah, look, hopefully we can get Oscar. I'm not exactly sure where he's at, but look, Oscar's massive for us. He's just a calming presence in that back line. And I think we've missed him in the last few weeks, definitely back there. Look, he's trying his hardest to get back, but whether he gets there or not, I'm not sure. Because he tore his hammy really bad last year. And then this year definitely wasn't as bad as last year's. But yeah, he's trying to go through his paces and hopefully we can maybe see him in the near future. But in terms of other players, I don't believe that there's anyone else that we're actually even a possibility of getting back. So I think it's just all on Oscar at the moment, whether he can make it or not, which, not sure about.
What's been the secret for a manager like Chris and for a leader like yourself, someone as experienced as you are? What's been the secret to holding this group of players together throughout the season? Because when players, and not just any players, important players that you really care about, friends as well as teammates, are dropping in the way they are, and with such severe injuries too, it would be very easy to drop your heads, lose confidence, that sort of thing. How have you sort of managed that within the playing squad and sort of stop them from unbundling themselves?
Yeah, look, it's been quite tough from that side of things this year. Like, we have a really close group. There's no egos in the change rooms. We all get along. It's always great in there. So, we've been unfortunate. We've had some pretty tough things to see this year, like Matt Thurtell having to stand in front of the group and tell them that he can't run anymore. We had Jacob Aliopoulos do his ACL. And then unfortunately 3 days later his uncle passed away, and then a couple of days after that, then his father passed away, all in 6 days or something. So that was extremely challenging for the group. We all went to his father's funeral. We just tried to be there for Jakey as much as possible away from the field, because those sort of things, football becomes irrelevant. But what it's done is really galvanised the group together. We've got each other's back. We've got even guys like Hamish Miller. He's gone for the season as well, and he's been out for quite some time. So, we just all stick together and try and, I guess some of us more experienced boys just try and lead by example, always doing the right things, recovery-wise, treatment-wise, getting out in the park and training, and just trying to work through. At this stage of the year, everyone's running at about 60, 70%. No one's feeling 100%. But you've just got to basically just get yourself out, get your bodies out in the field, and just have a go. And that's what it's all about at this time of year.
And look, it's a credit to the group of players that you guys, in the context of all of that, have been able to still continue to get results towards this back end of the season. And, obviously not getting the top two finish, but still finishing third. What would it mean, given all the different challenges you guys have gone through over the course of this season, how much football you have played? What would it mean to be able to potentially get to that? Obviously, you don't want to think about it just yet, but get to that grand final and hoist it, and be able to, bring those wounded warriors who, can come in their suits or their playing tracksuit or whatever, and potentially lift some silverware.
Look, it would be massive for the club. At the start of the year, that was one of the things that we penciled in that we wanted most. Obviously, on the flip side, it's cliche, but we've been a victim of our own success this year. I think us and Bentley have played, or probably us now that we played Brisbane City the other night, I'm not sure, but we've probably played more games than any other team. And as you've said, we continue to perform and play all these games while still staying top two. We ended up slipping out of the top two in the second last round of the season after being there the whole year. So look, it's just been a massive year for the club, for the playing group, and look, if we could, lift that trophy, it would be awesome for not only the players that were out there, but as I've mentioned, the boys that have been wounded this year, had their seasons ended and that sort of thing. And that's what I say to players at the moment. Like, even if you're 60 or 70% fit, at least you're in a position where you can go out there and play. We've got boys at the moment that don't have a choice, that sit there and watch us every game, and could imagine how they'd be feeling. So, we're in a position now where we've got an opportunity. We've made the final, so that's the first thing you've got to do to actually compete for the grand final. So, look, it's up to us now. We've just got to reset and just play some finals football.
Well, Tyson, good luck for Friday. Good luck for next Wednesday as well. It's a massive week for the club. It's an exciting week for the club. Hopefully there's more Oakleigh football to come beyond the next week or so. But good luck again. Good luck to yourself and all the teammates. Should be a great game.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. And hopefully there'll be a few people come out Friday night and see a good game of football.
Absolutely. Well, that is Holmes joining us here on FNR Football Nation Radio here on the NPL Victoria pod. Obviously, Lachie, it's going to be a massive couple of days coming up for Oakleigh. Obviously, looking ahead to Friday in that massive elimination final first and foremost against Heidelberg, and then of course the Australia Cup game against Sydney FC. But Lachie, before we look ahead, let's look back just very quickly and just take our eye back to the final day. You were commentating not only Wednesday night, but also commentating down on Sunday as part of the Super Sunday at the Oakleigh versus.
Oh my God, was that the same? That was the same week.
Same week, mate. You
just can't keep away from Jack Edwards
a regular
at the moment.
You should honestly build a bed there, mate. You may as well just set up a mattress in the turret.
I'll chat to Pakua and Rebecca about that. They might be able to sort me out.
Well, Lachie, it wasn't obviously out of all the games, it wasn't probably the most glamorous, but because we are running short on time today, and we've been told by our overlords that we have to go for 60 minutes today. We've got Pakua out there looking at us.
I never agreed to that.
But we also have a show straight after this, Lachie, by the name of Paco Radio.
I never agreed to that.
The season finale of Paco Radio that we need to get to as well with Alex Cobo and Oliver Stankowski. Let's start off with that Oakleigh versus Hume game. Hume with a 1-0 win. assure that they wouldn't lose 10-0 and Dandy City wouldn't win 10-0.
The best way to assure you don't lose 10-0 is to win 1-0. That's good strategy.
Hume is safe, but Oakleigh will go into finals having lost 4 of their last 5 in the league, and as a result, third place was locked in for them. What did you take out of that game? Was it hard to take anything out of it because just how gassed Oakleigh were, having played 120 minutes a few days prior?
I think it was a bit, and to be honest, I think the reason I wasn't shocked or stunned or couldn't take too much out of it was because this is just sort of the trend that's emerged post Australia Cup. We have seen teams play in midweek, come out the back end and not get the desired result. Heidelberg have looked a mile off. We obviously saw Green Gully have that shock against Melbourne Knights in the catch-up round after they'd played Australia Cup football as well. They fielded pretty much a second string 11 at Thunder this season just to conserve their energy. So I don't think it's anything out of the ordinary. Look, I actually thought this was quite a good game, to be honest with you. I mean, it was end to end. There were good passing sequences, but the profligacy from both sides, I think, really stopped this from being a goal fest. And yeah, the other big thing as well is that Chris Taylor decided to rest and bench both Oliver Kublai and Daniel Clark because they were on 4 yellow cards, and so he didn't want them suspended for the next game. And so maybe there was a part of Chris Taylor that sort of knew and accepted that second, that top 2, that double chance was maybe going to be out of reach for them anyway, and that really the Hume game wasn't the bit where it all went wrong. It was the St Albans game the week before. And yeah, I mean, you take 2 first team starters out of any team's spine, especially one that's already missing so many players, and you're never going to be absolutely at your best. I do think people actually underestimate what an important role Daniel Clark plays in the way that Oakleigh actually function as a unit. So I'll be interested to see whether his reintroduction, you presume, against Heidelberg brings a massive improvement. Kublai as well, as Tyson Holmes said, as we've said this year, is the unsung hero of that Oakleigh team. So those 2 inclusions will bring a new lease of life into them. So I wouldn't be sounding the panic button over the loss to Hume, but I think this is kind of to be expected when you've played 120 minutes of football in midweek. But for Hume, honestly, green shoots. I think the last 2 weeks will give them really big hope for season 2023 that they can sort of recoup, invest. But yeah, Ersan Gulam from the 2 games I've seen is starting to shape them into being an even more competitive outfit, but not a more competitive outfit because they have been competitive all season. They just haven't got the results. But they're starting to show a bit more of that cutting edge now. And as while we're talking about green shoots, who stays for next season, who goes, I really hope they keep a hold of Sam Ford. He's been excellent the past 2 weeks. His hold-up play against a really good young defender in Anthony Pantasopoulos and an experienced defender in Aaron Williams on the weekend was brilliant. His goal, excellently taken. I really hope that Hume keep a hold of him because I think he'll be an asset not just to them but to the league. But yeah, this I think was always going to be on the cards given the way Oakleigh were going. I think the crucial thing is with that week break, what kind of a team arrives at Jack Edwards on Friday night.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think if Oakleigh can just get their full complement out for that game against Heidelberg, I think that they probably should still be able to win that game. I think that this week Sunday, look, talking about last Sunday, Lachie, I mean, as you mentioned, you got to think high risk, high reward. You don't want to get more players potentially pulling up with cramp, more players that might join the injury list. You got to think about sort of longevity. And I think they'd back themselves in the 3v6. It's a home game regardless.
A lot of people outside looking into this game, and me too, because I was trying to obviously construct a narrative out of the game that I'm calling. There's a bit of self-interest at play here. But everyone assumes that the double chance is what they want because it gives them that extra week break. But and that's probably true. But there's also an argument to suggest that Chris Taylor is looking at it and is like, we've played more games than anyone else this year. Yeah. What is one extra game in the final series to us?
And a week off sometimes can actually be a detriment.
Yeah, I mean,
you lose that
for a team like Bentley or Oakleigh, just not having to play in midweek for 1 week is still huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's still huge.
It's a 5-day turnaround, unfortunately. So it's not a full week, but it is at least something.
But that's more than they usually get at the moment.
Absolutely.
They'll actually get to train.
Yeah, which is massive. And of course, they did lose both games against Heidelberg in the league this season, but nonetheless, we'll preview that game a little bit later on. Lachie, just looking at some of the games, because obviously there were a couple quote-unquote dead rubbers with, obviously how the league kind of worked out. We'll go to them now quickly. Dandy Thunder 3, Green Gully 0. I mean, Green Gully basically played the kids, quote-unquote played the kids, because they already had fourth place wrapped up after beating Eastern Line 7-0 in that catch-up game earlier in the week. So Dandy Thunder were quite clinical in getting that result. Unfortunately for Dandy Thunder, they won't play finals, but Green Gully, on the other hand, just looking ahead now to playing Bentley Greens on Friday night on their home deck. But I don't think that there's really too much else to take out of that game, Lachie, because Dandy Thunder, unfortunately, weren't playing for anything bar pride, and Green Gully at that point, it's just all about resting everyone up, getting them ready to go for the Bentley game.
No, and I do think that in different sports competitions over the years, we have seen teams cop flack for playing a second string 11 or rotating when they know they're moving on to bigger and better things on the final day. Particularly, we've seen that happen in the AFL.
The big Ross Lyon strategy right there.
A fair bit. To be honest, though, I think in this specific instance, I don't really think you can begrudge Gully, or at least I don't. Like, they've played another team who have been involved going deep into the cup, getting through to the round of 16. They played that catch-up game as well, so they didn't even get the benefit of a break on the Doherty Cup weekend either. I think this is a fair enough decision. If you can't give yourself that extra break that you want, you're not going to make any higher than you currently are in fourth place. Why not? Why not manufacture a rest for some of your key starters? I think the fascinating thing for me with respect to Green Gully, by the way, I've been very impressed with Nick Giarizzo, who started this game. Is one to watch out for, I think, or one that I'll be keeping an eye on. At least maybe no one else cares what I have to say. What I'll be fascinated to see is, with this extra week break, you expect most of the regular first teamers who didn't play that day to return and to be available against Bentley. Mm-hmm. Does that include Noel Bernardo? Because he hasn't played since halftime. Since he was subbed out at halftime in the catch-up round against Melbourne Knights. Mm-hmm. Now, I was at that game, and I just going to preface this by, I don't want to cast aspersions. I'm not suggesting that anything untoward has happened or anything like that, but he was brought off at halftime. Now, you would assume that he's had an injury. I didn't see it during the game. That's all I'm going to say. But that's not me suggesting that anything weird has happened or something like that. But I do think it'll be fascinating to see, with all this extra sort of time away, whether he'll be back for the Green Gully for the Bentley game. Because
you think that you got to do everything you can to get him right, because he's a genuine match winner.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anything, the fact he was taken off at halftime in a game where he didn't look to be injured is sometimes more concerning. But yeah, you would want a player who can create such magical moments like Noel Bernardo to be available for a game against Bentley.
Absolutely. So obviously, as mentioned, Green Gully Bentley Friday night I think that's at 7:30 down at Green Gully Reserve. It starts half an hour earlier than Oakleigh versus Heidelberg. The other dead rubber game was Altona versus St Albans, and we thought this would be the ultimate 1-0, but in the end, St Albans ripped up the script, and they've ended the season on quite a high note. 7 points in their last 9 games, a 5-1 win at Paisley Park. Moad Zued with 2 goals, Gergic as well with 2 goals as well. Quite a convincing win for them. They've ended the season on quite a high note, unfortunately for Altona. I mean, at least both those teams are staying up, but they head into an off-season with a lot of intrigue, because given the sides that are coming up, and given, I guess, the expected improvements of the likes of Dandy Thunder, Melbourne Knights, Hume City, and even Avondale for the teams that missed out on finals, they're going to find themselves probably, if they don't start to make some significant improvements, to be down there yet again. But for St Albans, great way to end the season. They scored, get this, a fifth of their goals for the season on Sunday.
They'd
25 for the season, 5 goals on Sunday. Great way to end the season.
Well, I think in the lead up to the Oakleigh game, they'd scored 4 goals in their last 9 games, from which they had just 1 win. So they've scored 7 in the past 2. I mean, yeah, and 5 on the final day, which I think just goes to show you how crazy football can be sometimes. It's going to be intriguing to see what kind of lessons Altona take out of their end of the season. Obviously, back-to-back wins for St Albans does masquerade a few problems, but 1 win in 9 to end the year for Savas Batikas. What do Altona and him as a head coach take out of that? What do they glean from it to improve for next season? Because if they carry the form they did in the back half of this year into next year, they're going to be in trouble.
Absolutely. We'll do a bit more reviewing of all these sides a little bit in a couple of weeks. I reckon we'll do a bit of a big off-season review. We'll start to look ahead to 2023 because obviously there's a lot of intrigue surrounding those sides going into next year and what they can do and what's going to be a very competitive top tier of NPL football. Lachie, let's go to Gardens Creek Reserve. Unfortunately for Eastern Lions, they didn't get that famed win at home, but they were in fact battered by Heidelberg on their way back down to NPL 2. Heidelberg did what they had to do, a 5-1 win, 2 goals from Maki Petratos, Costa Petranos as well. The J-Pin got on the score sheet as well, and of course Aiden Fetahagic. They put the game away quite early, 3-0 at halftime, and that was that. Yeah,
I mean, obviously in genuine terms, in sort of table where they are in the league terms, Eastern Lions have been, in technical terms, in the NPL, in the top flight. But I think the last 2 weeks against Green Gully and against Heidelberg, I do think that mentally they've pretty much just been in the NPL too. Like against Gully and against Heidelberg, these have been performances where mentally I'm in the second division of Victorian football. And honestly, I think the back end of this season, not just the performances on the pitch, but the amount of goals they've conceded, the performances they've put in, you do start to worry with a club like Eastern Lions. Like it's a single relegation for them this season. I fear that it could get worse. They strike you as the kind of side, not just with the results, not just with the performances, but with the turbulence off season as well, that could be at risk of a double relegation. Because like I said, up until this week, they've been in the top flight, but I think mentally their head's been in the NPL 2 for some time. And you can't help but worry if someone like a Kingston are a cautionary tale for the Eastern Lions.
And NPL 2 next year is going to be ridiculously catastrophic.
Yeah, it's not going to be just any NPL 2. It's going to be probably the hardest NPL 2 competition I've seen in my time covering the league.
Catastrophic in the sense that it could be catastrophic for them if they're not sort of ready for what's coming on the other side of this, because it's going to be an incredible NPL 2 season next year. But nonetheless, for Heidelberg, they're into the top 6. They finished 6th. Apologies for those on the stream that are just watching. We had a bit of a phone call. We had to go get the guys from downstairs, Lachie. So I had to just do a bit of it was almost like a what you see behind the curtain in the theatre production. The backroom change, the quick change of clothes, back up, get back onto the stage, sort of.
So I got to talk about my favourite trivia subject, which is the Eastern Lions.
Yes, so absolutely.
No good. There's no real losers there, Nick.
I'll keep that one in notes.
Other than the Eastern Lions, so of course
keep that in note for a trivia question. But anyways, we'll talk about the other side that went down, the other side that locked in finals. That's Bentley against Dandy City. 5-0 win for Bentley. Just dominant from the word go. I mean, Yagub Mustafa scored inside the first minute. Then goals from Corey Sewell, Ajak Riak, Lucas Derrick, and Pierce Waring back in the team, back on the score sheet. Nice little handy boost for Bentley going into finals. Just the win they needed to get to lock themselves inside the top 6. Took care of business. But for Dandy City, they're on their way down to NPL 2. Very similar situation, I think, for them next season going into NPL 2. But I think that they're in a better position, in my opinion, personally, when you look at their squad and look at how the club is governed, that they're going to be right up there again to potentially come straight back up in what is, again, a very competitive promotion race. It depends as well who they keep. Steven Topalovic,
that's the thing,
potentially on the way out.
You say squad, but then you really don't know how many of these people.
But of course, remember one thing as well, Dandy City will be able to attract talent. They will be able to attract talent, and they've already got a lot of established talent who I think will stick around next season.
They've got such great facilities. They're going to have, at least you would expect, finances that will be comparable with some of the better teams in the NPL 2, if not right up there at the very top. I think I would be a lot more hopeful of seeing them again in the top flight in the next few years than I would the Eastern Lions. And I'm not trying to just rag on the Eastern Lions here.
Feels like you are, mate. I'm kidding.
I'm not just trying to come after them or anything. I've had absolutely lovely dealings with every single person I've ever spoken to at that club. I really, we don't play favourites as commentators, but Eastern Lions are a club that when you meet the people, you do have a soft spot for them. But I just think you compare them to a Dandenong City, it's going to be much harder for them to contend with the financial means that are going to be offered on NPL 2. And those financial means will be above your average NPL 2 season.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing about, as I
I'm happy to be wrong about that too.
One thing about Dandy City is that they're going to be a team that probably a lot of players who are looking to make a move. You're a good NPL 3 player, or it's a player just looking to get a bit of a fresh start somewhere else, a player looking to get some minutes who aren't playing in NPL 1. Dandy City is one of those teams I reckon the players are going to want to go to. It'll be curious to see where they go in a coaching scenario. Obviously, Ljuban Palinic was the caretaker for most of this season after Mickey Chelina was moved on. So whether they stick with Ljuban Palinic as the head coach is something to certainly keep an eye on for next season. So the last two games of NPL 1 this weekend, Port Melbourne 2, Melbourne Knights 0. Port Melbourne wrapping up a top 2 spots. Chris Duggan and Troy Ruthven with the goals. Just... You know what, Lachie? It's what you expect from Port Melbourne. It's just a typical Port Melbourne win. They were the better side on the day. Melbourne Knights, I thought, have ended this season on quite a high note. Another team to keep an eye on for next season. Just in terms of some of the results they've gotten, I think the typical new coach bounce, I think, has worked in their favour.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as it probably could have gotten, but I think for them as well, a lot of intrigue surrounding who's going to coach them, who sticks around next year, and whether they can make that jump next season, because they're a team that have not been in the finals for such a long time. But for Port Melbourne, primed, ready to go for finals. They're the dark horse. They're the team no one wants to play. Going to be a very intriguing run from here.
I mean, the Knights just have to. Like, how many more seasons are going to go by when we say there are no more excuses?
Yeah, I know.
This is not good enough. This must change. This will change. Like, how many times? I mean, I don't... Again, a club who I don't have it in for or anything like that. I, again, really like the people I've spoken to from Knights. I think they have capacity to be one of the greatest clubs in Australian football. And I genuinely do mean that. But this just can't go on, especially in the context of what else is at play. This rot has to stop this season. Mm-hmm. And as you said, Nick, I think it is pleasing in that context that we have seen some better performances, some good players come through in the back end of this season, particularly those mid-season signings. I mean, if they keep George Ott alongside Jan Albano, the gold dust that those two have been able to create at times in this back end of the season, and add in a creative midfield presence potentially in behind them, which I think was an area they were particularly lacking, they will be a different side. Because, performance-wise, they weren't a million miles away. But yeah, as for Port Melbourne, I think they were pretty controlled in this game. They don't have a lot to worry about at the moment. Yeah. Other than
a week off, feet up.
Other than keeping an eye on whoever is the lowest ranked team, the highest ranked team to progress out of this weekend's elimination finals.
Curious, do you want Oakleigh? Do you want Green Gully?
Who would you want if you're Port Melbourne?
I think a full strength Oakleigh. You'd definitely say not Oakleigh. I think Green Gully.
That requires Green Gully.
Again, I think and of course Heidelberg winning as well. I think Green Gully as well in the sense that they
absolutely smacked Heidelberg last time they played at JL Murphy.
Now, you know what? There's no team they wouldn't want. I think Port Melbourne would fancy themselves against any of them. They match up brilliantly.
No, that's true. That's a very good answer.
I honestly think that for them, there's no specific team that they don't want to play. So I think it's going to be an intriguing watch when they get to that semi-final, who they come up against, because whatever comes up in that game, it is going to be absolutely incredible on that Saturday evening down at down JL Murphy Reserve, so looking forward to that. Final game from NPL 1, Lachie, because we do need to get to Paco Radio in about 15 minutes' time. So we need to get to NPL 2 and NPL 3 because there's a lot still to cover.
Wow, I've left you 15 minutes to talk about NPL 2. That's an issue.
Fine.
That's an issue.
Avondale 0, South Melbourne 1. Avondale, yes, missing the finals. We said South Melbourne weren't going to lay down for them, and they definitely didn't. They did what they had to do. Langla with the goal. A red card to Matty Reid at the end kind of just wrapped it all up. Avondale, an end to a season where it's disappointing that they're not playing finals, but I think to an extent, Lachie, when we think about their disrupted preseason, the injuries and everything that has happened, I think to an extent you can almost give them, I wouldn't say a full pass mark in terms of missing the finals, but I think that you can understand that these things happen and it can catch up with you. Doesn't matter how much depth you've got. And I think Zoki Markovski's done as well as he can with what he's got. There's been some bad results, don't get me wrong, but I think that you can almost give him a bit of a pass in that sense.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe I'm just the nicer one of us two. Maybe I'm just being nice here, Lachie.
No, I mean, I guess of all the sides that have had various things to deal with in terms of playing a lot of football and the injuries that come with that, I do think Avondale have got a case to make that they're sort of the most impacted, because I think they, unlike a lot of other teams who have had the injuries pile on as the season's progressed, have dealt with them throughout, consistently over the course of this season. They obviously did have that kind of protracted pre-season period because they had to play Hume in the Doherty Cup at the end of the year. And I mean, if you think about it, really, Hume and Avondale have probably...
But they've been the two teams that have regressed the most.
Have both performed underneath their expectations and have probably dropped a similar amount of ladder positions this season. So...
Yeah, no, I reckon about the same.
Yeah, so you have to wonder... I mean, I'm not a sports scientist. I can't claim to have any inside knowledge about this. But, you know, the way that sort of intense training, that lack of time to get extra rest in and to build up the load as you go through a preseason, I'm sure would make a significant impact. But, yeah, one of these sides who did have that kind of injury hit year was going to have to miss out. And I think... kind of like what you were saying, it does make sense that it was Avondale because they have had to deal with those injuries all throughout. But like, having said that, there were a couple of games this year that were just inexcusable. Like Dandenong City, the loss to Dandenong City, the loss to St Albans at the start of the year. Like, they just can't happen. Absolutely.
Especially
the Dandenong City.
No, I get that. But again, it's just one of those things, Lachie. I mean, you got to get those points in those plucky games, but by the same token, but by the same token, Lachie, the Dandy City game was a weird one because Dandy City equally is desperate. Those are the sort of games that you're going on the road. It's a tough game. You've played a few days before that against Mindle Aces as well. Like, there is that bit of a pass, but I understand the St. Albans stuff. But look, end of the day, it's no finals for them. But I think next year they'll be right back up there again next year, right among the top sides. I think they'll reload.
Absolutely.
This is, I think, a blemish. I think this is
will be
one and done.
A blip, like a blip on the radar for them.
Absolutely. So let's go to NPL 2, Lachie, because my God, was it a crazy final day. The way, obviously, it's all ended with Moreland City and North Geelong, the two sides promoted. Moreland City winning that game 1-0 against North Geelong means they are premiers. They are promoted for the first time in 75 years, that game being at Campbell Reserve, of course. But there was a lot of drama in all around when it came to the Pro Rel playoffs. Brunswick Juventus being right on their tails, Lachie, because, of course, Brunswick Juventus had to win to stay alive and hope that North Geelong would get something. And... first, let's actually look, we're not going to get to Brunswick events. There's a lot to cap off because there's some things that happened as well.
We might have to record like a mini podcast.
Yeah,
like
I know.
A post.
Okay, let's just talk about obviously for the other results. Langwarren 3, Manningham 2. Any quick notes on that?
A great game.
Crazy finish.
One of the best NPL 2 games I've watched this year personally, and I had
to save for the dead rubber.
And I've watched a lot of good ones. Langy 2-0 up, Manningham fight back from 2-0 down, and then Langwarren score a winner with the last kick of the game. I mean, what more could you want from a dead rubber? Like, as dead rubbers go, that was about as alive of a rubber as you could possibly find.
Brito with the winner as well after Salvatore Accordo scoring the 2 goals. Kingston City won, Bulleen won. Kingston actually led in this game, but as a result of that draw, Kingston fall into the bottom 2. Brunswick City winning 4-2 away at GV Suns means Brunswick City is safe. And of course, we'll get to Brunswick Juventus Werribee in just a sec. Pascoe Val awarded a 3-0 win against Northcote after that game was postponed. The game was supposed to happen tonight, but Northcote forfeited the fixture. They're playing Melbourne Victory in a friendly tomorrow, so they've opted to go down that route instead. But Pascoe Val now, as a result, actually finished 3rd, Lachie. So if there was a pro roll playoff, they'd still be alive. And that's hard to hear.
It'd be against Hume as well. That would have been a gripping game.
Let's go to Campbell. Let's go to Campbell Reserve though. Well, Money Park Campbell Reserve. I had the joy of calling this game. Moreland City winning this game 1-0. Jamie Latham with a goal inside the opening 10 minutes. In the 6th minute, in fact, he opened the scoring. There's a few different things about this game that I want to touch on. First of all, this game almost got called off. The pitch was not great for those obviously who remember, obviously being in Melbourne over the latter parts of the week. It was raining like hell and a lot of the pitches copped it, hence why the Northcote game was off.
Yeah.
Campbell Reserve didn't hold up nearly as well as would have liked, and the refs left it right into the last minute to make a decision. But of course, given the stakes, given, there was a busload of North Geelong fans that made their way up the highway to Campbell Reserve.
The North Geelong fans are like looking at the pitch, looking at what could be on offer if they got the win on the pitch, like, I'm leaving here with something.
I'm leaving here with something. But
I'm from around the way.
But unfortunately, Lachie, they didn't leave here with something.
No.
It was a great turnout, guys. A lot of Moreland City fans came out for this one. A lot of neutrals, a lot of Northcote and Paco guys came down because that game was called off. It's like, well, what's the game just up the road? Go down to Campbell Reserve. Moreland City scored the opener through Latham, and I've got to say, it probably was the poor clearance from Flavel. And I don't want to call it entirely a poor clearance because the ball kind of bobbled a little bit on the pitch.
It was a bit of an clearance, up and under though.
And it was he didn't make the most of it at all. It wasn't a great clearance, not taking anything away from what Moreland were able to do with it. Jamie Latham has been brilliant over the last few weeks. He took the goal well, gave him the lead, and Moreland City were just able to get into their system, defend well against North Geelong, and didn't give North Geelong the freedoms to get forward. The likes of Mikulic and Salvatore really struggled to get into the game. They came very close, North Geelong, to getting back into it. Candelian was very lucky not to be sent off. I mean, he with a challenge on Lachie McGrath, got a yellow card for it in the end. And of course, then Apaya Kuno had a goal disallowed for a foul on Anthony Bunavats, which would have sealed it. And I thought it was a goal. I thought that it should have stood. But in the end, Bunavats got away with it. And then Bunavats almost twice got the equaliser at the end. But Moreland City hang tough. And look, I just want to say a specific shout out about this game because I had one of the Moreland City players, Byron Figueroa, in my mentions after the game and as well exchanging a few words post-game as well. And he's a keen listener of the podcast. And for a comment I made in regards, I'm glad he's holding me to an account for it because we say a lot and I'm glad that people are listening and holding us to account. It's really great for the engagement. Said obviously that, Aidan Mustanagic, quote unquote, terrorised him in that game against Pascoe Val a few weeks ago.
Now you've said it twice. Nick. That's just rude.
Look, and I've got to give Byron credit. He played really well against Lachie McGrath and Salvatore on the weekend. He held his own brilliantly. And you know what? Rightfully so. Tell me off about it, mate. I appreciate being held to account.
See, the thing is, this is actually what we want.
Absolutely.
Like
I'm not offended by it. I'm glad it spurred him on. If that made him play better, I'm great.
We don't fear accountability. Like no. I am openly willing to admit that if Eastern Lions are not double relegated next season, or they get promoted and they're the best team in the NPL too, I am perfectly happy for someone from the Eastern Lions, for, I don't know, Aaron Fabris to grab me by the scruff of the neck and go, you fool. Yeah. Don't you remember what you said? What? Like, I'm happy with this.
Honestly, I got a lot of respect for Byron for holding me to account for it. And great as well. And you know what? It's great for him and it's great. And I thought it's the whole team. They defended so well. And Byron was part of that back four, which did brilliantly against Caleb Mikulic. And we've seen how dangerous him, McGrath, Salvatore, Alice, Opperman, when they've been able to get forward, they have been so dangerous. And they held their own brilliantly. Bavka, Zutsidis, Eilbold, they all did sensationally. Corey Thomas, the whole team was brilliant. Now the big question is what comes next for both these two teams. Because North Geelong, I think the conditions suited Moreland City. They have played at home so well on that smaller pitch And North Geelong, who like to play out from the back, it probably didn't suit the way they wanted to play. There are a lot of sort of quote-unquote saucy players that like to play the ball, like to try take on players. Moreland City just didn't give them any space. And again, that's a credit to the defence, credit to the setup, credit to Adrian Mathers as well, who's gotten Moreland City up to the top tier. But now it's what comes next. They haven't been in this situation before where they've been promoted, Lachie. I mean,
what was the first
time in 75 years in the top tier. And they've gotten so close. They've finally smashed through the glass ceiling. And again, credit to them.
what a weight that must be off the shoulders.
Absolutely.
Campbell Reserve.
But now it's the big one, because we saw on Saturday night a certain memes page has already gone early and said congratulations to Moreland City for being relegated in 2023. I just want to say that I hope that spurs Moreland City on to prove a lot of people wrong, because it's one thing making the leap, it's another thing staying in the top tier, because it is really hard. Once you get there, it is really, really hard to stay out. We saw what happened to Eastern Lions. I know it was a very different set of circumstances, but for Moreland City, it is paramount, I think, for them to keep the core of their squad and also build on it, because they've got a great starting 11, but I think as well they need more.
And they've got some good young players.
Absolutely, to build around.
Well.
Yeah, they've got Theodorakopoulos and Max Basetto and
was it not a couple of weeks ago where we talked about Fletcher Fulton on this podcast?
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm pleased to see those kind of players get the chance to show what they can do at a high level. I mean, there are, when you look at an individual level for this side, there are some really, really great narratives. I mean, someone
Corey
like
Thomas,
Christos Theodorakopoulos, who was on the outer at Avondale, did have some promising performances last year, has dropped down, has been dominant in the NPL 2 competition, as good as I've seen an NPL 2 player play, and now has got Moreland City back up. Corey Thomas, you mentioned, the players who have been part of that side that went so close. Apaya Kuno, the season that he's had, the battle he's had with injuries, and now back and scoring that amazing goal against Brunswick Juventus. I mean, you have to credit, given they had that 8-0 loss and everyone was like shockwaves going off in the NPL 2.
And things turned after that.
That was going to be the turning. They lost one game after that. They lost a single game after that.
Yeah.
In the past two weeks, they've played what? They've played
Pascoe Vale
and North Geelong.
And beat them both.
They got the win in both games.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, again, what I'm saying is the main thing about Moreland City is now it's about, all right, we're there. Now it's time to look ahead and see if they can maintain, because it's going to be hard next year. Just with the expected improvements of a lot of the sides in around them, as we mentioned about Hume City, Melbourne Knights, Dandenong Thunder, Avondale, they're going to have to really scratch and claw, because it's going to be, there's obviously as well, the one thing, Lachie, is there is going to be a target on Moreland City. There's going to be a target on North Geelong as well. They're the new guys on the block. They're the teams that teams are going to go up against and say, we're expected to beat you guys. Moreland City and North Geelong should embrace that, especially Moreland City. They should turn and say, no, you know what, stuff you.
Moreland City are the new guys. North Geelong like the new old guys.
Yeah, Moreland City just like, no, stuff you. Like, we deserve to be here. We belong here. Let's go out there and let's prove a lot of people wrong. And I hope they play with that same, because Byron tweeted it as well after the Pascoe Vale game, saying put some respect on our name. Well, you know what? They've earned the respect of coming up to NPL 1, but now it's like, all right, let's get that respect, but keep trying to earn that sense. Like, play with that chip on your shoulder, because it could go a long way. If they can maintain their status, it'd be sensational for them, because as we mentioned, it's one thing coming up, but you don't want to be a one and done. And we've seen with North Geelong, when they've got promoted the last 2 times, they went straight back down. North Geelong, on the other hand, they're going to have a big task this off-season. They've got a really good squad as well, really good starting 11 to build around. It's going to be curious to see whether they can add to that. So that's going to be something to certainly keep an eye on. But Lachie, because we have to start wrapping up, just quickly on Brunswick Juventus Werribee, because when it was 1-0 to Moreland City and Moreland City North Geelong with only a few minutes to go, Brunswick Juventus had taken a 2-1 lead. So it was like, oh boy, if North Geelong score here, my God, like everything's going to fall apart for Moreland City going to not only lose the premiership, but they're going to fall out of the top 2. And then the Moreland City game ended early and the broadcast ended with the score at 2-1 to Brunswick Juventus. I walk out of Campbell Reserve thinking, oh yeah, it didn't mean anything. Brunswick Juventus still won. And then I see that Hiruma scores a double for Werribee inside the last 2 minutes to not only, end any hope of Brunswick Juventus going up, but to keep Werribee up. And Lachie, I got to say it, all right? For those who haven't seen it, it's like the Simpsons meme of, when Ralph gets his heart broken by Lisa. It's that exact moment his heart breaks. He's listening to the Brunswick Juventus live stream and listening to Joe Sullers' call of Hiruma's winner. because you just feel his heart break and him saying, all right, we've lost the game. We've lost the game. And you can hear him packing up and he's like, by the grace of God, I hope we're back next year. The disappointment is tangible. We felt that. In a sense, and you feel for Brunswick.
Well, everyone relates, doesn't it? Everyone's been there. And I think that's, as someone who's been involved with club broadcast, that's exactly what you want.
Absolutely.
Obviously, the result is not what you want, but the realness, the pain of Brunswick Juventus being so close to their top flight return, but just not quite getting it, is there for all to see. And I think as much as that is painful for Brunswick Juventus, it's.
We'll see what they can do for next year.
It's good to have that real passion. Absolutely. It's good to have a reminder of how much that means and how furiously they will fight next year to make sure they don't make the same mistake again.
Absolutely. So just whipping through the rest of the games in NPL 3, Lachie, because we do have to go in just a second as well. Melbourne Victory falling 1-0 to Nunawading, but it wasn't enough for Nunawading to climb into the promotion places after Western United beat Geelong 4-1. Melbourne City's 6-2 win against Springvale White Eagles condemned Springvale to relegation after Ballarat City beat North Sunshine 3-0, and Preston's 3-0 win against Box Hill was enough to secure the championship. And of course, in Men's State League 1, as we mentioned, Beaumaris, Sporandara, Caroline Springs, George Cross and Essendon Royals coming up to NPL 3 next year. It's really exciting to see Georgie's back up there as well, just quietly. And of course, it's a bit sentiment for me with Sporandara because that's my junior club. So very happy to see when I was there, Lachie, in 2012, 2013, they were State League 4. So it's great to see that they've made the way up. They merged with Carey. Shout out to all the people involved as well, to Manny Katroulis, the coach. They've done a great job with where they've come from, and it's going to be great to see them in NPL next season, unless there might be potential some shenanigans. We saw the social media posts from Malvern City. So
Nick, come on.
Yes.
You've already got this podcast in enough trouble.
Yes.
Let's not get ourselves in more.
Anyways, Lachie, before we go, let's get some predictions for this weekend. Let's start with the Pro Rail playoff, shall we?
Yep, sure.
Saturday, Western United versus GV Suns. Do GV Suns win one game and stay up, or do Western United go up? I'm going to say Western United win this game 3-1.
I mean, if GV Suns win this game, it will be absolutely a heroic effort.
Yeah.
Just because of... Not because I expect them to be uncompetitive or anything like that. Just because of the amount, to travel to the Valley Park to have to play this game and play a game that's in Western United heartland. That is a tough assignment to try and save your career. I will be so fascinated to see how Western United deal with Matthew Breeze.
Oh, yeah.
That is going to be Matthew Breeze against whoever his midfield opponent is, Noah Holmes, is going to be the battle to watch out for. I do think Western United will drop down some of their best academy talent, and as good as Matthew Breeze is, Western United... It's not
going to be enough.
I'm going to say, maybe nicer than you, I'm going to say 3-2.
Kingston, Melbourne Victory on Sunday. Now, this is an interesting one because Victory as of late, it depends who plays because they have been in some 50-50 form as of late.
Yes, and also, not the first time these sides have met. Yes. These sides played a pre-season friendly against one another as well.
On that occasion. Lachie, you know what? I am going to go Kingston 2-1.
Wow.
I think Kingston eke a win in this game. Sorry, Oscar. I think Kingston just win this game.
These are extra time and penalties, right?
Yeah, 2-1 in extra time.
Okay. Well... I'm going to say 2-2 at full time. And then, Victory to win it in extra time. But the second phase of extra time, right before penalties. I think, irrespective of who stays up or who goes up, this will be a really good game because Kingston will fight tooth and nail to keep themselves in the NPL 2 to avoid that, I guess, what technically would be a double drop for them in terms of completed seasons. And they've got quality players, so too to Victory.
It's going to be a good game.
This will be appointment viewing for me.
Well,
it will be for me because I'll be doing the game. It would literally be an appointment. I will put it in my calendar.
Appointed to the game.
Yeah, it is genuinely, it's appointment viewing.
Honestly,
for work purposes. But for those at home too.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll tune in from Queensland. We'll see how we go.
You should do that.
I might. I'll see how I go. What I'm doing on Sunday at 2:00. Probably going to be on the beach.
Watching this game.
Yeah, probably. let's go to quickly the elimination finals, Lachie. This is tough.
Oh, no.
The Big Green. Green Gully, Bentley Greens, 7:30 down at Green Gully Reserve. Lachie, I'm going Bentley Greens in this one. I'm going a 2-1 win in this game. I think Bentley are going to be too strong. They're getting some players back at the right time. They've hit some form at the right time. I think they're going to stamp their place in a massive, and this is kind of a spoiler for my next prediction, a massive semi against South Melbourne the following week.
Oh, God, this is really hard. No, I'm going to go 2-1 Bentley.
Okay, we're on the same page.
Yeah, the fact that Pierce Waring is back and can sort of add something off the bench, I do think makes a big difference. Look, if someone could tell me whether Noel Bernardo was playing in this game or not, it might sway my prediction. But no, for now I'll stick with Bentley.
Final one, Oakleigh versus Heidelberg, 8 p.m. Jack Edwards Reserve on Friday. I'm going Oakleigh Cannons 3-2. I think this is going to be a absolute war of attrition between two sides that are just going to throw haymakers at each other.
See, the last game these two sides played against each other at Jack Edwards was one of my favourite games of the season. Heidelberg winning 3-2 in the end. Oh, God.
So, Lachie, come on, be bold, mate. Remember, you can go in extra time. You can even do the penalties.
I'm going to say 1-1, and I'm going to say Oakleigh on penalties.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So we both have the same opinion. Port Melbourne, Oakleigh, South Melbourne, Bentley Greens in the semis.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, Lachie, that's time. That's you're locking it in. We can wrap up.
Although it would be interesting to see a Greek derby.
South Melbourne versus Heidelberg would be massive.
That would be so good.
Yeah. Well, anyways, for those at home, all those games, as we mentioned, will be on NPL.tv this week. So make sure you're all around it. We'll be back next week. Well, I won't. But Lachie, you might need to call in potentially Oscar Rutherford and Pakua Frimpong for next week.
I'll get someone else.
Oh, wow. You're not going to give them the call up. You know what? Their form in the twos have been sensational. And even when they've come in, look, we're going to do a bit of an AFL reference here for Oscar because he has his Collingwood scarf on. This is like having Josh Carmichael and Ollie Henry as the medical subs.
No one knows what you're talking about.
No, the Collingwood fans get it.
Okay, well, I don't.
What they have to do. We saw, this is that they're coming in. They're ready to go for a full game. I think it's time to get them in for next week.
Sure. Yeah.
Losing the linchpin of this podcast and time to bring in, the two others.
I'm quite happy for you to go to Queensland.
Or are you going to do a solo edition?
Well, I started with my Eastern Lions soliloquy. Why not build it into a full show next week? Who knows? Well, anyway, join us next week where it will be Lachie Flanagan and... Yeah, who knows? Will it be someone?
Well, Lachie, you talk about soliloquies, mate. I mean, you could do it, but your name's not Joey Lynch. But anyways, guys, time for us to wrap up here on the NPL Victoria pod. Miss any of it, head over to our socials, head over to our podcast platforms. Be up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it might be. It'll all be there. But stick around. Paco Radio on the other side of this with senior head coach Alex Cobo and assistant coach Oliver Stankovsky. So for myself, Nick Tabano and Lachie Flanagan, we'll be back next week for a full review of the first week of finals.